Hi, I'm Steve Snyder. I'm the president and CEO of the Fleet Science Center. And for those of you who don't know, that is the Science Center here in San Diego. We serve all the San Diego County, bringing all sorts of cool science engagement opportunities, connecting scientists and individuals, talking about all sorts of cool things that science does for us, with us, to us, and all of the above. And we're really excited here today to have this panel about the Foundation series, and whether you take that series as the book, that series as the TV, or both. It's all cool. All are welcome here. If you are confused and you think this is about something about Bob the Builder, then please, now's the time to make your exit. Otherwise, we can get things started. Now, I'm just as a bit of a preview, I'm going to tell you, I first encountered the Foundation books years ago. Brother Dusk. And I had just, and it was really early in my reading years, I had just graduated from the Hardy Boys books when my great-grandmother brought me this 1962 beat-up copy of The Hobbit. I thought, oh, this is so cool. There's things other than jalopies and strange people and odd buildings to read. And I had read that book and then found myself a couple months later in our small town local bookstore. For those of you who may not know, bookstores used to be these small things that had books and people who really... Anyway, no change in this bookstore. I had $3 in my pocket, which was a lot at the time. As I said, it was years ago. And I'm looking around trying to find something to read. And so I see the science fiction section, because it was all one thing back then. There was no and fantasy or fantasy. It was all one. And I'm looking around and I see this book. And because I'm a kid, I'm looking at the cover. And the cover has this desolate landscape, this broken Greek column. There's a figure standing on it, and it's gazing off into the horizon where there's this giant, enormous spiral galaxy. I thought, that looks so cool, I want to read that. And I picked it up, and it was a book called Foundation's Edge, and it was $3.75. Busted. But the lovely woman who owned the bookstore saw this and said, oh, you don't want to read that book. That's the fourth book. Come over here. She took me to this, and they don't even have them anymore. Those carousels that just spell postcards from, that's where you used to get paperback books. And there on the paperback book, she pulls out, this is it. My beat-up copy. Here it is with the sticker on it, because that's how you knew what much it was. It was $2.75. Okay? On sale for $2.47. Oh, yeah. I have to admit, the picture on the cover, Daryl Sweet's illustration, was not as exciting as the galaxy picture of the new, more modern pieces. Although at the moment now I probably have about 40 different books with his artwork on the cover. Little did I know. But I took the book home all excited and then put it, because I was a kid, down and didn't look at it for about a month. And then on a Sunday, it was raining and my father was watching golf. The only TV. So I picked the book up, opened the cover, and sometime that night closed it at the end and said, that was frickin' awesome. What's the next one? Now, luckily, at the very back of the book, and my fellow brothers and sister Dusk will recognize this, was an ad with a clip-out coupon in the back that said what the other books were, and for $2.75 plus 50 cents shipping and handling, take that, Amazon, you could have it mailed directly to you. Needless to say, I read all those books and many more. It was like introduction to science fiction, as it was for many of us. And really, again, I still have the books. I've read them every couple of years because they're really awesome. And now we have a whole series loosely based on the characters and ideas therein, but still a cool series to talk about. So what we're doing today is we're just going to kind of dive into some of the science and things that are in there. We've got a great panel of folks here with lots of expertise to talk about what could be, might be, should be around these topics. So let me introduce our panel to you right now. So directly here to my right is Uduak George. She's an associate professor, Department of Mathematics and Statistics at San Diego State University. She uses mathematical models to identify mechanisms that regulate formation of tree-like organs such as lungs and mammary glands. Next to her is Sanchit Savlak. He's a physics graduate student at UCSD, specializing in astronomy, where he studies the galactic environment of galaxies far, far away. Next up to him, we have Caroline Kunstan. She's an assistant professor of development, aging, and regenerative program at Stanford Previs Medical Discovery Institute. She explores the genetic and molecular mechanisms of longevity and aging. Next to her, we have John Evans. This is the long title.
What?
Professor, Tata Chancellor's Chair in Social Sciences, Associate Dean of Social Sciences, and Co-Chair of the Institute for Practical Ethics, UCSD. And now panels at Comic-Con, where he conducts research of the ethics of human biotechnology. And then finally, we have Jorge Oresti. He's a stem cell expert and sci-fi enthusiast. He's a group lead at IXCells, and he works on searching for cures for rare diseases when he's not swimming with seals or immersed in a graphic novel. So thank you all for being here. We're going to kind of dive into some questions. Then we'll have, once I've kind of, got all my questions answered, we'll turn it over to you so you can ask the panel some questions as well. As a reminder, I'm Steve, but for the rest of the program, since I'm the moderator, you may call me Empire. All right, so to kick off, we cannot start any discussion about what's going on with these books without dealing with the big thing, all right, psychohistory. This idea that we can predict and model behaviors of humans on a large scale across huge swaths of time. Wouldn't it be cool? I don't know, would it be cool? I don't know, but I'm going to turn it over to John, our social scientist. Just talk about this notion of psychohistory. How real is it? Could it be? Should it be? What's up with that?
Yeah, what's up with that? So this morning I looked at it again and thought about it a bit more. I think what's most interesting about the whole notion of psychohistory is Asimov came up with this in the 1940s. And as you expect from most science fiction, he was prescient in that he anticipated by 10 years a worry of the 1950s that social science could actually be used for such a purpose. The idea that a super precise social science could not only predict the future, but could essentially control behaviors became a big debate in the 1950s. It also essentially, reading these books, sent a bunch of famous people into social science, most notably Paul Krugman, now a New York Times columnist, but Nobel Prize winner in economics, thought, econ's about as close as we have to psychohistory, so I'll do that. But I think what's also interesting about it is that it makes us think, number one, is that a world that we want to live in? Where it is something like psychohistory. Asimov proclaimed to a reviewer at one point that, he wishes there was such a thing as psychohistory. I'm not so sure. I think the control it would give would be worrisome. But no worry, I will tell you that it is very fanciful that such a thing could exist with social science for many reasons, but primarily because us humans are nowhere near as constrained by social structure, as we would say, as Asimov's notion implies. That people just do not react in such a predictable way to constraint. And therefore, I could imagine predicting something a couple of years into the future, but by the time you get to the 1,000 years, it is clearly implausible. So I do think, like most things in science fiction, warp drives and so on, it makes us think, what do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a world with psychohistory where it exists?
So let me put this other piece to it. So let's say we've got this idea of whether the forces involved actually would allow such a thing to happen. Let's say you had enough data. I'll turn it over to you, right? Could you model such a thing? What would it take to model? Let's forget a 25 million inhabited planet, 1 quintillion population planet. What would it take to model something of that scale and size?
Well, I think right now we have AI coming in, artificial intelligence, and then we have so much capability to be able to model, make predictions of things that have been very difficult for us in the past, in terms of having the way to be able to frame the question in a way that we can have a computer kind of simulate that and give us response. So we've been moving forward, and I think most times when we think about something, the scientists, we start thinking about how can we achieve that. And we are not there yet, but I think that we've made significant progress in terms of, I'm going to pick an example that in mathematics that we do, where we can model social and behavior of a community of people. An example is in modeling infectious disease, for example. We can model groups of people, and we can actually predict if you know certain parameters. For example, if you know incubation time of an infection, and then you also know how the rate at which it's being transmitted, you're able to predict how fast that infection is going to spread. So with terms of COVID, that's what gave the idea of, okay, we have to make sure people isolate so that this is not spreading so well. So thinking about a community of people, we can actually make predictions of, depending on people's behavior, you can predict like infection and so many different things. So there are fields of mathematics that are doing that. So if we had so much data, we could make so much prediction, but there's so much uncertainty in terms of human behavior. So we all make like random decisions, and so those are all things that you have to bear into. So right now we are not there, but I think it's possible that as we move on to many years, we'll draw closer and closer, but I don't know how far we would go. I can't make that prediction, but we've made significant progress.
So given the wealth of data that people have on all of us right now, it was said maybe 20 years ago, I was talking with some people from marketing, and they'd tell you, if you tell me your zip code, I can tell you the brand of toothpaste you have on your counter with that kind of precision. So you're suggesting that maybe as being able to crunch all that data, the models get better, the ability to predict in some short-term point that might actually be possible. I can't imagine, I'm just talking to the ethicist here, what the ethical implications of that kind of power may be. And is the fear that Asimov had still there in terms of the idea of today and AI and large data modeling something we should be concerned about?
Well, I think the answer is yes. I think that anyone who has that level of information would be about people's interactions. That's the only data that would be useful. And anyone who has that information has a degree of potential control over others. And at least in Western democratic societies, people are very concerned about people having control over others. And so I think that's one of the things I would disagree with Asimov about, which is I think he saw sort of utopian notions that if we could essentially have this information, we could create a better society through some sort of overstructuring control, like happens in the Foundation novels, where like, well, we'll change this particular event and that'll fix this problem. Whereas in actuality, I think the nature of human beings would suggest that such information would be used to enact power of one person over others.
So we're all ultimately the mule. All right. So we'll switch gears a little bit and think of something more specific to the TV shows. And another topic certainly of concern and discussion is this idea of cloning, right, which plays a big role in the TV series. So Jorge and Carolina, I'm going to talk to the two of you, our biologists in there. Where are we on cloning? How close is this going to be, and how close are our multi-generational brothers day, night, and dusk to something that would actually happen?
So, well, the storyline about the Client dynasty and all the clones, that they have all these three different brothers, it's important to point out that it's TV show only. It's not in the books. I think that probably Isaac Asimov, when we was writing this over 100 years ago, they probably wouldn't even imagine that could happen. So, and it's actually one of the better parts of the show, for me personally. So I think it's a pretty good addition, okay? Not to this as Isaac Asimov. I mean, the novels are pretty good. You should read them if you see that, okay? But I think it's good to make this distinction, because I think that part of the storyline really brings up a lot of things that are more like contemporaneous, and that's why you don't see them in the books. And about the technology itself, so as scary as it may sound right now, it actually exists. So we can, if we were crazy enough as a society to have someone to be like the same person, and worship him as emperor, we could actually do that, because the cloning technology exists. I mean, obviously it's not actively happening for a plethora of ethical reasons. Hopefully we don't need to dive into that. At least not in the US. I don't know for other countries, okay, or they want to go into that either. But the technology exists, okay, so it could be possible. I mean, there's a lot of other things that they are not possible. So the fact that they kind of keep the bodies, I mean, they already have like one copy of Dusk, one copy of Day, one copy of Dawn, and he can just like thaw them, they are like frozen, and he can just thaw them, and they are like one adult, one like older. that could be a little bit more complicated, no? So the fact of like trying to keep people at the same age, like when they do also these space travels, no, that they just sleep for 100 years, they just arrive to the destination and they are the same age. That is a little bit more complicated, so we are not there yet, but we probably will eventually. But in terms of the cloning, that's definitely possible. I mean, if we had like some kind of machinery, some kind of a structure that you can get a new baby born every 30 years, I don't know, approximately like the age difference that they have in the show. And we have, again, as a society on a structure so crazy. To do something like that, I mean, technically, we could. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think my perspective on cloning is always, clones exist. They walk among us. I think everybody of you knows identical twins. They are clones. They are actual clones of each other, right? And are they the same? Are they the same person? I beg to say they're not. And then we go back to the other question of, even if you clone your dog, is it going to be the same dog that you're going to have? It is not. Just because you have the same DNA, the same genetic material, does not actually mean that you are going to be the same person with exactly the same proteins, with exactly the same function, consciousness, experiences, thought processes. So I think the idea of cloning, that it's going to be just like exactly the same person in an army of clones, or again with day, dusk, and dawn, it's a little bit fantastical, right? Because how the environment also interacts with the genetic code makes every person very different. If you were born 100 years ago, you would be completely different than you are now because of the difference of experiences that you have, because of the different everything, right? So I think the idea of cloning, it always sounds very scary, but it's actually not what is portrayed, right? That you're going to be the same consciousness, the same person, or exactly have the same experience throughout. So what I liked in the Foundations is actually how their genetic code was actually changing, right? How in the series, then also all of a sudden other traits that were not maybe as desirable came through, and that can happen. And there will be changes. So clones are not the same, and they exist. Yeah.
But do you think the way they show it in the show, at least, that they are clones, but they're also getting trained to be dawn, day, and dusk all the time, like they're practicing day in, day out?
Absolutely.
Like, would that, yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, your experiences, and also like formative experience, like for instance, in this show, with the Sky Bridge collapse, right? Formative experience. Kind of thinking about 9/11, thinking about the COVID pandemic. How does that have an influence on society and social structures? Again, will change how you are as a person, and that's not necessarily defined just in your genes, right?
And I think that part is actually one of the most important, because it's exactly what you said. I mean, the clones are not going to be that. If we got clones to different people here and you put them in different environments, they're going to be different. So that part of the show is actually very cool, that there is this part of the android, no? I don't know how to pronounce the name, Dax.
Demerzel?
Yeah.
And that she's like the constant all the time, because she's like educating all these different emperors, having them have the similar personalities. And actually in the second season, they also tamper with the memories and stuff. So you really need that process. I mean, only by cloning two different people, they are not going to have the same personality. I mean, at level like personality or like personality traits, and then also at the level of like one maybe colorblind, no, another may develop a different disease. So maybe the physique is going to be similar, but you're going to have different 100%.
And add one last thing.
Yeah.
The thing I really find interesting about this is like the clones in the Dynasty are essentially like hyper versions of the British royal family. So like, how does the British royal family claim to have this connection? Well, they're all genetically in this lineage. Okay, that's how all European royalty worked. Well, clones are actually more precisely in the lineage. So I think this is an update of the British royal family for the contemporary era, where people are so concerned with genetic relatedness that it's not just that there's this one link, it's that they're literally clones of each other. So I think it's like an update of that notion of the royal dynasty for the modern age.
So this, this idea of cloning and the idea of change along the way, certainly it's a theme that shows up in the books and all of this too, that moments happen, there are mutations, there are variations in this. So this is not necessarily addressed in any of this here, but the basic model is this is a galaxy-wide empire. 25 million worlds, I think is referenced there. Quintillion people. Over tens of thousands of years. If we take two populations of humans, we stick them on opposite sides of the galaxy, and we let them evolve for 10 or 20,000 years, how related will they be genetically? I mean, how long would it take for two isolated populations to get to each other and go, what are you now?
I mean, it depends on generation time. It all depends on generation time. So, and also this whole idea of the cryo freezing, right? So can you halt that? How long would it take? Would we be able to go back 1,000 years and mate with our ancestors 1,000 years ago? I do believe that is possible. 1,000 years is not enough. Is 10,000 years enough? Maybe that's when it's getting a little bit more difficult. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's, as I mentioned before that, I think that's one of the most, like, fantastic parts of the whole story. I mean, obviously it's convenient, no? You need to have some kind of device to have, like, different characters, different timelines interact with each other. I think, I mean, if I had to, like, guess, like, how that is going to evolve, I actually don't agree. Don't agree. I don't think that what I was saying, no, the part of the Gale that she just gets cryogenized and go to different planets at different time points. I think it's more interesting how Harry Seldon does it. I mean, the fact that you can kind of upload your consciousness as some kind of program, so software or something, no? At the end of the day, it's like just a bunch of data, no? That you have your personality traits, your memories, and you can like put that into some kind of cloud and then download that into like a new body, no? Or like, or a computer or something. I would think that that's probably more close to what we will achieve in reality eventually. I don't know, the people that is more like into big number thing.
I think at some point, if we are able to understand how the neurons very well in the brain are communicating and how things are interacting in our brains, and we can upload like such information, if we are able as humans to understand that, we might find a way to be able to transfer some information. So just saying the same thing you're saying from one person to another. Because all we need to do is to understand how the neurons are communicating. Then if I understand that, I'm able to take information from another person, just thinking about it as an algorithm, which I can program in a computer. I think it would be possible to take it and then transfer to some other person. But how understanding that it's not fully known, but we know certain parts of the brain are doing certain things, and those are currently being worked out, but it's not fully understood. But I think as we progress, we'll be able to do such of those things.
I also have like a science fiction fan kind of answer to this, because Foundation universe is the kind of universe where you have humanity has spread through the galaxy, but travel is instantaneous. Like you can get anywhere faster than light, so you're not necessarily like people are aging at different rates. That kind of thing doesn't happen. Communication is also pretty instantaneous. So it's not like an Ender's Game kind of universe where you take 12 years to travel and on the planet like 40 years has passed or something. I know they show that in the show, but in the books it's not. It seems like they can communicate instantly. So I think it would be more if you have two populations that are geographically isolated, but if they can regularly communicate with each other and they're just people traveling all the time between the planets, then I think they can co-evolve. And there's some of this in the books where certain sectors of the galaxies are like described as like, oh, people from that sector of the galaxy behave like that. And even in the show, the two planets that are closest to the Foundation and the 4 planets, they form like a 4-planet alliance instantly. So I think in a galaxy where you can communicate instantly and you can travel anywhere, like it might be easier to evolve together like than in this scenario.
I mean, I think about what would happen sociologically if these people were that far apart, right? Even think of, to reference The Expanse, These people are all in our solar system, and they've essentially developed totally different cultures, the inner planets, the belt, et cetera, and they're already different cultures. If I took everyone in this room, broke out my transporter, transported everyone to the moon, and didn't let you interact with any other humans for 1,000 years, you would have a totally different culture in every conceivable way. So without these sorts of forms of communication, your global empire doesn't work. Or global empire, your galaxy-wide empire.
Yes. Yeah, but I would say that the books actually deal with that, no? I mean, the books are about that.
Yeah.
Because they use religion.
Yeah.
No? At least in the first books, no? I mean, so it's about how they use different tools, no? First is religion, then is trade, as a ways to have this cohesion between cultures in a intergalactic empire, no? Which, I mean, obviously the show didn't deal as much with that, but yeah, it's a very good point.
All right. So New York to San Diego, just 1,000, couple of orders of magnitude higher than that. All right. So obviously another big piece that shows up, again, interesting in the series, not really at all, well, to an extent in the books, although maybe the later books it certainly does, is this notion of AI. And none of my questions at all were in any way done by ChatGPT. Absolutely not. I did not, no. So given this sort of notion of this emergence of generative AI and the picture of what it may be, or would possibly be, is that where it's going? Next Thursday, or do I put my money in put my money on OpenAI now, or?
So I can go as an Asimov fan on this one, because there's a different Asimov story, which I don't know how many people have read. It's called The Last Question. Show of hands, just read Last Question? Yeah. And basically where I'm going with this is your AI takes a lot of computing power. Like, you need data centers that are somewhere in the world. They're consuming a lot of electricity, and the better your AI gets, the more power these data centers are consuming. And in The Last Question, the question is, like, effectively, without spoilers, can you build basically a computer that can answer anything? And sort of solution there is these computers are just getting bigger and bigger, and they're like planet-sized computers. And so in saying that's where the AI is going, I think ChatGPT at 4 has the intake is something like 8 trillion pieces of, my actual number might be off, but like data content off the internet. And they're basically running out of more data to train the AI. So to make it the next level, you need like an order of magnitude more data, and they just don't have that. And we have one Earth, and soon we're going to just run out of space on Earth to just build. By ChatGPT 8, we're just out of land, right? So we can't grow to that extent, I think, on a single planet. And I think we might be peaking out soon from the looks of it.
And to add to what we just said in terms of the machines, that computers that are being used to train these algorithms, some of them need so much cooling, so much energy is being absorbed. This takes lots and lots of money. And I know that most times, most of us remember that when we started using personal computers, much earlier on, computers were very large and they filled big rooms. But now we can carry computers all around, and it's so easy. And I can tell, this is a story I often tell my students, because right now you type on a coding class we're working on writing out the coding class, and then you type, and then all runs, and then you get your result very quickly. But then when I was a grad student, I remember a student who shared the same office with me, and he had his algorithm running for 3 months. And sometimes he writes all big on his computer, please do not turn off, because it takes 3 months for him to be able to get results that from his program. That's how long it takes to run. So sometimes power goes up. So if it goes off just a week before, it's 3 months, that's like extending his PhD work. So he has to wait more months to be able to get it done. But now we have better computers. So where am I going with it? I'm saying that if we get better computers, get better cooling powers, and then we have the engineers produce better like machines that are much better than what we have now, then we'll be able to speed up and do even more than we are doing right now. some of the things with AI that we are doing now, we wouldn't have been able to do it a couple of years back because we didn't have the computational power. So it's always with more computational power, we're able to do more. So the more we have new, different computers coming up that are able to overcome what we have now, we humans are going to do a little bit more. So
out of curiosity, of all of you in the work that you do, is AI part of your work? Is it a part of the toolbox right now?
Yeah. Yep. It's like a really good coding secretary at this point.
All right, great. So my final just sort of set of questions is back on sort of some of the physical technology that's there. And obviously a big piece that's in, again, the TV shows, not in the books, although it shows up in lots of science fiction books, is what's called the Star Bridge there, or the idea of the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the term, the space elevator, right? Space elevator idea. So what's the physics involved?
I'm actually reading a book on this right now. It's by Arthur Clarke. It's Fountains of Paradise. I don't know if people have read it, but I mean, theoretically, it is possible, right? The problem is you need a material that's strong enough to be your cables of the space elevator, and then you need to build it on the equator on the planet, and you'll have to compensate. Like, you will literally have to start building it in space up and down at the same time. So it is possible. We don't have a material right now that would work, I think. And we're off by like several orders of magnitude. And the thing that we don't have is basically a wire that can be thin enough but strong enough. So the strongest things we have right now are carbon nanotubes, which can take the most strength for like the thinnest wire, and they're like 4 orders of magnitude or something smaller than what we would need. So it's like a giant gap.
So the stuff that you've seen in the book, reading the books, or just this is a question for all of you, or in things that you have seen in the shows, is there one that sticks out like, yeah, no, that's a swing and a miss, right? It's not going to happen. There's something fundamentally wrong with the underlying concept, although it's cool. And is there something like, oh, that is so spot on and prescient?
Yeah, I did have a thought when I was watching it, and when the Empire was basically questioning the validity of the science, of the results, of the predictions. And then they had their own mathematicians try to check whether this was correct. And they didn't like that they couldn't get to the answer that they wanted. And that just kind of rung a bell with me, because this is what science is, right? You can't change the answers you're getting. No matter what you want the outcome to be, if it is not what the results show or the math shows, you can't change it no matter how much you dislike the results. And just this notion from a government to being against the science and the results that are there, that just kind of resonated with me. And I
think that there's a lot of parallels with like current crises, no? They are not really well-known crises, but they are crises that really, like climate change, that it happened with COVID like a few years ago. So I mean, this notion that we have the tools to predict or to know how certain things work are still the powers that we don't want to take any measure because they don't want to believe or it's not in their interest or anything. That I think that also it's a very good point. Also resonated with me a lot. And one thing also that it was surprising for me, but this is like a book thing too. It's not in the shows, but in the book, they make a lot of big deal about the nuclear powers. No, I mean, it's like the nuclear powers that when other civilizations or other planets, they have nuclear powers is like a big deal, no? And then for me, that always resonated, like a civilization that has mastered intergalactic travel, isn't they going to be that? I mean, are we supposed to be like already miles away from atomic power at that point? So I remember that when I was reading the books, that was something that I was like, I don't know.
The nuclear power is interesting because, like, the first reactors we build will be pretty similar to the ones described in the book. Like, the tokamak being built right now in France, I think, is going to be like a huge building. And so the first ones we build will always be huge. The miniaturization, it's, again, in comic book terms, very similar to, like, Iron Man in what they do. Like, Foundation finds a way to make these reactors really small. that's wild. Like, I can't imagine how that could happen in my head.
That was the how is it called, like the security auras, no, that he jumps on the window and then he just gets the stop before the floor. I mean, that they become invulnerable with those devices. That's also, I mean, not possible at all, but that would be cool to say.
I mean, then I guess this goes without saying, but sociologically and in terms of politics of it, it just resonates with world history in that basically you have an empire, have power, and you have people trying to be free. I mean, this is a trope that almost all our media is about, but that's a recurring theme, that this is an empire and these people out at terminus, wanting to be free, et cetera, et cetera. So that obviously strikes me as, very true about every era, but repeated here in the Foundation series.
Right. So, what questions might you have? There's a mic in here. Feel free to come on up and ask away.
Hello.
Hello.
So one of the questions I had is, with the works of Lorentz's weather model and Strogatz's work in nonlinear and chaotic systems modeling, does the existence of chaotic and nonlinear dynamical systems that appear in our universe, does that prove that predicting future events is impossible, or just another factor of the model that we're going to have to take it into account?
Can you?
You might want to try to summarize that close to the
Oh, sorry.
Close. Is that
I was
better? Hoping someone else got it. Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm 6'8". Okay. All right. With the works of Lorentz's weather model and Strogatz's work in nonlinear and chaotic systems modeling, does the existence of chaotic systems and nonlinear dynamical systems, does that appear in our universe, does that prove that predicting future events are impossible, or just another factor of the model to take place that we have to take into account?
I can try to answer that a little bit, because if I heard you very well, you're talking about chaos
Yes.
and nonlinear dynamical systems. If that means that we can predict the future.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So in terms of that, you have chaotic systems, but then within chaotic systems, you also have organization. So you have order that comes out from chaos. So I think if we can predict the chaos, like what makes this thing chaotic, then you'll be able to see the order. Because we see lots of different math models that even though there's a lot of chaos, we can predict what is going to evolve out of that system. So it all depends on the system, how complex your system is, and if you know the different variables in the system. So if you know that, then you have potential to be able to predict, but it's not going to be uniform for all different systems. It's going to be systems that you know all variables and how what makes it chaotic, and then you may be able to predict.
I guess just to add on to that, if we're talking about chaotic systems, but right now we're only looking at the qualitative level and not the quantitative level, and we're looking at the quality. Is there a possibility that are we heading towards a part where chaotic systems are being able to be modeled more quantitatively than qualitatively?
There are some people whose work is on chaos. They focus on trying to use different, like nonlinear dynamical systems, like you said, and lots of different models to be able to understand what makes something evolve out of the chaos. And so it's still active an area of research, but I can't predict what the future could hold. But I always believe that if we know how the way to define how these systems are evolving, then we may be able to make some predictions. But right now, for some systems, yes, but not for everything. Like you can see with weather predictions, there's a lot of chaos, so much on things that are not predictable, so many variables. But we are getting better and better in being able to predict weather patterns.
Thank you so much.
Can I just give one comment on this? I'm having a hard time hearing everyone's comments, but in general, people who've attempted to take patterns of physical behavior in the natural world and apply it to humans have failed. Humans just do not act like the models of various diffusion and everything else you could take from physics, et cetera, et cetera.
Hi there. So the Foundation series was one of the most formidable books which I read during my childhood, during the pre-internet days, and was one of the things that led me to take a degree in artificial intelligence and cybernetics at Reading University back in England. As my long-suffering wife will attest, I spend a lot of time on Reddit, on forums, discussing the nature of consciousness, the ability to upload one's mind into a computer, and if anybody's familiar with the ship of Theseus, if anybody's watched the Marvel WandaVision series, that gave a rather excellent description of what that is. My personal theory is that the ship of Theseus is whichever ship that Theseus is standing on. So you've got the old ship and the new ship, and the consciousness is Theseus, and you can move your consciousness from one ship to another by the nature of Theseus being the individual. I'm interested to hear what the panel thinks about that and what their personal theories are on the nature of consciousnesses and how realistic it would be to upload one's mind to a computer in that regard.
What's the swing in that?
Yeah, okay. I have that question kind of when we were talking about can you upload, like when we were talking about can we upload our consciousness into another vessel, right? And can we upload that? And it was exactly my question. So how do you actually define consciousness? What is it in your body that is actually required to maintain the consciousness, right? Is it just the neural networks? Is it the networks, is it the connectivities? Because if that is just that, right, the change of the connectivities, then you theoretically could upload those systems and those patterns, right? But everything in me as an individual kind of thinks it's not as simple as that, right? Like what makes you you, and how, just thinking about it like a computer, like AI, just a decision 0-1, right? Or strength of connectivities between your neurons. Is that really sufficient, right? To really then get to where you are. And then if that is the case, then we're actually maybe getting to consciousness cloning, which is maybe more scary than real cloning.
Yeah, my personal theory, based upon what I learned at Reading, is I like the idea of that we're not necessarily the neurons, but we're the signal passing over the neurons. So that way you can avoid the consciousness cloning, because as long as the signal is continuous, you transfer the person. But if the signal ever stops, even if you take a human brain, you stop all synaptic neural activity, and then you turn it back on again, you've got a person who might have all of the same memories, all the same consciousness, but they are fundamentally a different person because it is a separate signal in that regard. So those are my thoughts. Thank you very much.
So you are not getting into the transporter.
No, right? Definitely not. No, I am not getting in the transport.
Yeah, if you're interested more into consciousness, because I think it's important. I mean, we don't know how to define consciousness now, but I recommend you to look into organoids and brain organoids, because we are starting to talk about these concepts about like, if we create a brain organoid, does it really have conscience or not? So maybe something like that interest.
Hi, thanks for this panel. I wish we could talk for another hour. I personally think that even though my signal has stayed the same, I'm actually a totally different person than I was even a week ago. The question is AI versus AGI. I was thinking about what threshold needs to be overcome to achieve the AGI. And I think I heard Mr. Soblik talk about we'd have to have a computer the size of the planet, we'd have to use too much power. But isn't parallel processing that might be achieved through quantum computers the way that we might get over that and get over the power issue? Is that the threshold that we're talking about, the power issue, or is there something else that needs to happen for us to get to AGI? And then maybe a follow-up question would be, when would AGI become sentient, or would it naturally be sentient? That's a lot of questions.
When you say AGI,
I don't know if it's artificial generative intelligence or
The general AIs.
But,
Yeah.
but you were talking about the data as well, and I would hope that maybe you'd address the idea that the data that's used to train these things, at least for the AI currently, is the best and the worst of us. How can we get better at that? Thanks.
So-
Take the answer to any of those questions.
So I'll preface this by saying I'm not an AI expert. I have studied some of it in different contexts. But my understanding is these are effectively like matrices you're training in some ways. Like these are just, and you don't know why. Imagine like a 3x3 grid and there's 9 numbers in there, and you put some input into that grid and a different number comes out, and maybe you're asking it a chess move and the correct chess move pops out. Now, this grid can be like multiple dimensions, it can be huge, and these numbers can be complex. And the key thing is we don't understand why those numbers realistically end up in there. And that's what the process of training does. It trains that matrix to reproduce some output, right? So when it comes to general AI, what we have right now with ChatGPT is it's able to predict the next word because it's read a lot of words. It knows the order they usually appear in, and it's really good at getting the next word that you will say if you've said a sequence of words before. So to make it general, you would have to be able to give it some tasks that it would do and then tell it how the correct tasks are done, and then it would have to reproduce those. So I think the amount of data you would need would go significantly up. Quantum computing can help in the sense that it's a different kind of computing. The closest metaphor is like, think of digital versus analog kind of computers. That's kind of a step change. So they might be able to do different kinds of problems. They might be able to attempt different kinds of problems, but the question is, can they just keep getting better until we have the perfect AI? And is there no like power restriction? I think we'll still end up into some other power restriction, even if we're able to tackle slightly more general problems with like a general AI, if that makes sense.
And the difference between AI and AGI is that AGI would actually be its own thing that could think for itself.
Oh, I think you would have to ask a computer scientist that, but it's yeah. There's some.
That's why I was talking to on July 4th. Anyway, how this.
All right. So you have the last question. No pressure.
I'm very honored to have the last question. I came in really late because I've been trying to get to everything and it's impossible yet. But I wanted to comment on, there was a gentleman that was before this lady, excellent. I'm going to get on the transport, and here's why. I met somebody, I think we all kind of think that everyone's kind of like us. We all think, we wake up in the morning, we have inner thoughts and all that stuff. I met somebody that does not have an inner dialogue, and I couldn't understand that. And so I was asking questions to this person. What do you mean you don't have an inner dialogue? You don't think, like you don't have a conscious? It's like, no. She said she went to yoga classes when she was young, and the yoga teacher would tell her, okay, everybody close your eyes and think you're on a beach and relax and think about the waves. And to her, she thought everybody was just like fooling, like playing along in a joke. She couldn't imagine this. She couldn't think about any of it. She just closed her eyes, and it was like, it's just nothing, zero information to her. And there's a small part, I looked it up, because I was dating this person. I was like, this can't be, is this an anomaly or something? There's actually like a small percentage of these people that don't have an inner dialogue. So that's my point, is the whole, do we actually have a soul, spiritual, whatever, or are we just neural networks, right? And we're just, some of us are just built the small percentage a certain way where that just doesn't click in, but the majority of us, it's, we think it's just normal. Yeah, of course we have this soul and we think of, or this inner dialogue, whatever it is, but the reality is it's just very complex neural networks working together, coming together, and we can map it out. And so I'm saying, send me, I'm good with it. I'll get to the other side.
All right. Keep the controls. You can go on the transporter. And actually, it's a good last comment, because clearly what all this is about, and what I think we all love science fiction, is it brings up these ideas, makes us think about possibilities that we hadn't thought of before, makes us think about the world in a different way. And these folks are all lucky because they get to then take those ideas and see where they might actually be. So I want to thank you all for coming out this afternoon. I want to thank our panelists. I will see you in Comic-Con, or on the site, or on just San Diego, or at the Clip. Thanks.
Thank you.